I simulated 10 seasons of F1 23 with BMW back in the sport to see if they could finally win a Constructors' Championship. As it normally starts in these sims, Max Verstappen was the winner in Season 1, closely followed by the Mercedes duo of Hamilton and Russell. This was a hard-fought one for Max though, as Hamilton was only 9 points away and Russell only 14. Perez stunk out the Red Bull team, finishing 7th in the standings with only 1 win as Red Bull lost their Constructors' crown. Down the grid, Norris and Leclerc both got a load of points despite not getting a win, and BMW were at the bottom of the standings as Haas snuck into 7th and 3 teams had 1 point each. And finally, somehow, I have no idea how, Liam Lawson got pole in Las Vegas and then just went and won the thing. He didn't make the top 10 though because he only got 8 races, but this leads us nicely to the driver transfers for Season 1. At mid-season, Sargent was dropped by Williams as they clearly needed some money after the extensive crash bill caused by Logan, and got Lance Stroll back. Magnussen replaced him at Aston Martin, and Albon went to Haas with Piastri moving to Williams. Ocon went to McLaren, and obviously as said before, Liam Lawson went to Alpine. At postseason, Alonso did the usual and retired, which led to Sargent being given a second chance in F1. Leclerc moved to Red Bull to partner Verstappen, Norris transferred to Ferrari, and Perez went back to McLaren. For Season 2, there are small reg changes as durability is affected, and looking at the R&D chart, Aston are looking pretty handy as they sit in 3rd, while Mercedes and Red Bull duel at the front. McLaren are also not as good for some reason. Oh, and BMW are still pretty bad. Let's see if that durability change shakes up the grid at all. I'm fully expecting Ferrari to drop off a cliff, seeing as it's durability we're talking about. Oh, and would you look at that? Ferrari clearly sorted out their durability. And of course they were 1 and 2 in the championship. You know, I'll be real with you. I simulated this video about a month ago, so I completely forgot Sainz won a championship with Ferrari. That's why I made that prediction. 6 wins to Lando's 2 was enough for the Chile as he somehow finished ahead of Norris. Perez was also back for revenge as he got 4 times as many wins as Verstappen and was only the 3rd driver to break 200 points. Leclerc also beat Verstappen despite still not having a win in the sim. Turns out he does have a win, he won in Saudi. Well, the graphic's wrong, sorry about that. We also had some new winners and a 2nd time winner. Obviously there's Norris who got 2, Ocon got his 2nd win at the final race in Abu Dhabi by 64 milliseconds from Perez, and Magnussen finally got a win in Canada. After their great performance in Season 1, Mercedes went nowhere but still finished 4th because Sargent was in the 2nd seat at Aston Martin. And BMW still suck. Trust me, they will get better. The final surprise was Haas as they nearly beat Alpine thanks mainly to Albon, who actually got a podium in that Haas at Spain. But onto the moves, and there were a lot. First to go was Hamilton, who gave up on Mercedes as he was replaced by Leclerc. Ocon went to Red Bull as Gasly moved to McLaren. Ricciardo returned to Enstone, and Sainz wanted to start his career again or something because he went to AlphaTauri. Well, with that, Russell got the seat at Ferrari, Sargent got the seat at Mercedes, moved to Aston Martin, Portier was promoted to full-time driver at Alfa Romeo, and the craziest move I've ever seen in Season 2, Zhou Guanyu and Max Verstappen did a seat swap. Yeah, this season's cursed. The first time winners keep coming as Gasly won in Season 3. 10 wins for Pierre and 5 for Perez made it 15 out of 16 wins for the team. And that one race they didn't win wasn't because they crashed into each other, it was because of Ocon.
I don't know, it's so difficult not to look smug at this point.
The order was pretty standard in the top 10 as surprise surprise Zhou was terrible at Red Bull. I mean, I guess he wasn't that bad, but they still lost to Ferrari and they didn't even get a single win. There was improvement at the back though as BMW finished in 9th place. They still haven't scored a point, but it's progress. The only problem with one team dominating the sport is that there aren't many shock winners, so let's move on to the driver moves. There weren't many, but these few included Stroll swapping Williams for BMW as Hauger went to Williams, Sargent was dropped and Magnussen went to Mercedes, Piastri headed to Aston Martin, and Drogovic was forced to go to Williams. We would have rig changes for Season 4 as aero and chassis were both affected, and finally, a quick look at the chart. McLaren are at the front but just barely, Alpine look decent and BMW are improving. Well, we got a pretty much identical championship. Only Gasly got 10 less points, Perez got 1 more, and oh my god, Zhou finished 3rd. Zhou, I was not familiar with your game. McLaren got another 15 out of 16 wins, and the shock result went to Aston Martin's Piastri, who achieved his 1st place in Bahrain. This top 10 in race 1 was a bit weird, it's fair to say. And to be honest, the whole championship was pretty weird results wise. Clearly the rig changes worked. McLaren was still at the top, but Aston Martin were 3rd, Williams were 5th, Mercedes was 7th, and Alfa Romeo and Haas got a load of points. BMW didn't score any though. There isn't much to say because McLaren made it boring, and so we move to the driver transfers. You're going to need to prepare for this because this is a lot. Okay, Hulkenberg retired and Sargent went to Haas. Yeah, there was only one move for Season 5. There would be power rig changes though, so expect Alpine to fall off a cliff with their slowest Renault power unit becoming even slower. And looking at the chart, BMW are ahead of Aston Martin now, as Alpine have snuck into the top 4 ahead of Mercedes. It was more of the same for Gasly as he won his 3rd title in a row. This one was a bit close for comfort for Pierre though, as Perez was only 21 points behind and he even had Leclerc to slightly worry about. Magnussen was definitely part of his best as Mercedes suffered with only one good driver and Leclerc was forced to carry. Piastri also carried Aston Martin as they finished above Ferrari, and the best news of all, BMW got points. Yes, it's only 7, but again, it's progress. Kubica demolished Stroll 29-5 and I'm fully expecting some podiums next year. With the top 10 covered, let's move on to the transfers. There were more this time around as Stroll was dropped after losing to Kubica and Ocon was his replacement. Sainz rejoined the championship fight to take the Red Bull seat. Bottas replaced Sainz at AlphaTauri and Sargent got a 3rd chance in F1 with Aston Martin again. This meant Haugen went to Haas and Stroll ended up back where he started at Williams. We have no reg changes for season 6 and the chart shows a clear split between the back and the front of the grid, and also how BMW have bridged the gap and become a very decent team. Finally, we have a different winner. Leclerc finally got his title and yes, he did actually win it, no graphic errors this time. What's even more crazy is Ocon in 2nd for BMW. He got the team's first 4 wins this year as well as 8 podiums as he carried the team to 4th in the Constructors. If Kubica was good, maybe they would have won the whole thing. But back to Leclerc, he got 7 wins, nearly 300 points, and his teammate wasn't even in the top 10. Standard stuff for Mercedes these days. Sainz did well on his comeback to the front as he got 3 wins and 10 podiums, and Gasly didn't do too badly. Ferrari continued to be mid, Aston Martin nearly beat them, and Williams are still doing alright. Onto the driver moves, and just as quickly as he arrived, we say goodbye to Ocon at BMW. He would go to Alfa Romeo. He was basically a seat filler for season 6 because I wanted a big marquee driver, and that driver was none other than George Russell, Mr. Osama bin Russell himself. This led to Tsunoda going to Ferrari and Doohan going to AlphaTauri. Perez retired at McLaren as Lawson replaced him, Vips went to Alpine, and finally Bottas retired. So his replacement was obviously Verstappen. Yeah, he's been relegated to backmarker teams for some reason. There were no reg changes for season 7 and the chart is pretty pointless because of this. It's just flat. And finally it's happened. After the chance at a championship went begging in 2008 with Kubica, BMW won the driver's title with George Russell 21 years later. He drove very well as his 6 wins meant Sainz was 41 points off in 2nd. Leclerc was also quite good again, and with a lackluster teammate, Mercedes only finished 4th. It's also fair to say that Russell's teammate sucks. Who knew a 46-year-old Kubica wouldn't be any good? McLaren were the unlikely champions with only 2 wins, but a consistent and equal match driver pairing. And Ferrari finished 6th in the Constructors with Alpine falling behind Alfa and Williams. Considering Zhou lost the championship for Red Bull, I think we're going to be getting a few moves in the transfer market. And we got a few mid-season ones as well, as Sargent moved to Alpine, Albon went to Aston Martin and Vips went to Haas. And at post-season, Magnussen retired from the sport with the Mercedes team absolutely delighted with this news. In his place came Max Verstappen. You cannot get a bigger upgrade than this. Mercedes were back. Oh, and Vesti joined AlphaTauri. Yeah, we only got 6 moves all season. There wouldn't be any reg changes for season 8, and with a flat R&D chart, we might well get a repeat of this year. Mercedes were definitely back, but Leclerc held on to the number 1 spot in the team as he beat Verstappen despite not getting as many wins as the Supermax. Sainz, Lawson and Gasly were all somewhat in the fight as well. The Silver Arrows returned to the top of the Constructors table as McLaren's consistent drivers earned them 2nd place and Aston Martin got 4th ahead of BMW despite their drivers being 7th and 8th in the standings. And the BMW situation. Well, what happened was, last season we weren't making that much money every week and keeping George Russell as your driver is kind of expensive. And so, to increase my money load, is that a word? I shut down all of the R&D departments seeing as there weren't any more upgrades to do and left it that way. We got a lot of money and kept George Russell, but what I didn't know was that you aren't told about reg changes if your facilities are shut down. Turns out there were aero, chassis and durability reg changes. The worst time to get all 3. So we lost all our parts for those and had to rebuild again. This is what the screen looked like at the start of the season. We were gone. And this is the R&D chart at the end of the season. We bounced back pretty quickly. Luckily we had the money saved up from last season so we could just rebound back up there, but it still took half a season and that took its toll. Hence why Russell was 6th in the standings and not dead last. But excuses over, let's move to the driver moves. There was only one for season 8 and it involved the BMW team. After our mess up, our position in the Constructors wasn't good enough for Russell's standards and so he didn't want to negotiate. His replacement was Ayumu Iwasa. And Russell didn't find a seat. There weren't any reg changes this time, I'm sure of it, so let's move on to Season 9. And for the first time since Season 1, Max was champion again. Leclerc was nowhere to be seen this year as he was unusually off the pace. I'm sensing a bit of sabotage. Verstappen got 7 wins, but Iwasa was in the fight for most of the year as he got 2 wins. Sainz also got 4 wins but was nowhere near to Max as we nearly had 4 different teams representing the top 4 in the championship. Mercedes held on to top spot as McLaren once again with their consistent drivers got 2nd and Red Bull were just ahead of BMW. With these 2 teams they are pretty much one-man machines as Zhou and Kubica are terrible. And Ferrari doing Ferrari things. They still haven't recovered and have now become the 2020 version of themselves, but instead of being bad for 1 year, they are permanently bad. All the teams scored points, which is promising I guess, but not too much has changed. It was another slow year in terms of driver changes as only 2 moves happened. This had been coming for a while, but Zhou was dropped by Red Bull finally as they got George Russell. With powertrain regulation changes coming for the final year, could Iwasa win a title with BMW? Would Russell win it in his comeback year, or would Verstappen stay at the top with Mercedes? It was the final option, but it was very close. 7 points separated Verstappen and Iwasa, and they were actually level on points going into the final race at Abu Dhabi. The order stayed the same in the constructors apart from Red Bull, who finished behind BMW. Kubica definitely hadn't taken a turn for the better, but Sainz had gone backwards and only got 86 points as his teammate was forced to try and carry the team. Ferrari continued to be terrible and Williams nearly beat them, all thanks to Djokovic's 56 points. This was a weird simulation, but definitely an interesting one. BMW did finally win their title, but it could have been so much more, if only their upper management wasn't so stupid.